Hello and welcome back to game number 7 of our series Masters of the Chessboard, where we are going through Richard Reti's book Masters of the Chessboard. This is game number 7 and the fourth game of Morphy. Morphy has got the white pieces and our opponent is Alexander Meek with the black pieces. And I think we've already seen a game by Meek, if I'm not mistaken, in one of the first 3 games of the series. I believe he faced Adolf Anderson. So I guess we can see if he fares any better here, which is very unlikely. Now Morphy opens the game with e4, and Meek responds with e6, going into the French defense. Now, Reti offers a bit of analysis just at this first move. It's quite interesting what he writes, actually. He comments that because white is up a move, white starts the game, so white almost has an advantage in a tempo. It should perhaps be black's aim to stop the game from opening up, because it's often to the advantage of the better developed side when the game opens up. So if the game does open up, white will be more likely to be at an advantage because they will always be that one move ahead of black. So black may well want, therefore, to try and keep the game closed, and something like the French defense certainly does that. And actually, Reti comments that in modern tournaments, closed games such as the French defense is the most common defense played. Which is quite interesting because certainly today, in today's games, we don't see anywhere near as many games with e6 and d5. It's certainly a very respected defense. The French defense is very respected. It's played quite often, but nowhere near as much as e5 or c5. But anyway, if we get back to the game, Morphy responds with d4, claiming the full center, which is a normal French defense variation. Except here, Meek plays c5, which is the Franco-Sicilian defense, at least according to chess.com's opening database. The best move is probably d5 here, going into the French defense. But c5 has been played by several masters, and it's certainly playable. It's just that c5, at least according to Reti, gives white an advantage in the center when they push d5. Now in the game, Morphy played d5, claiming this space advantage. But he doesn't necessarily have to. Knight f3 is another option, which could go into a open Sicilian. Or white can even go with something like c3. So then, after d5, you could go into the advanced French. After e takes d5, you could then have this structure here. So it's certainly a lot of different options. But Morphy chose d5, going into the Benoni, and this is probably the best move in this position, really. So we've got the old Benoni here. Now, the best move here is e takes d5. It's the main move, and it's the only real good option. You could possibly develop some pieces first, but e takes d5 is the main move. Now, Meek actually pushed e5 in this game. And here, Reti comments that Morphy's way of playing in closed positions doesn't really show his superiority when you compare his playing to open games. However, because Meek played e6 and then e5, this loss of tempo essentially gives Morphy an opportunity to try and open up the game with an advantage. And he does that with f4, straight away trying to open the game. So he's attacking this pawn, and Meek replies d6, defending the pawn, knight f3, adding more pressure to this pawn, and then bishop g4, pinning the knight, and therefore removing an attack of this pawn. Morphy takes on e5, and now here Meek takes on f3. And here Reti is again critical of this move, and rightly so. He says that just as we've seen time and time again in the previous games in this book, here we see black exchanging one of their developed pieces for one of white's developed pieces, but in a situation where white can recapture with a developing move. And after this recapture, we see straight away that black will almost certainly have to recapture this pawn, but now it's white's turn and they're able to develop, and white already has a piece out, whereas black doesn't. And it's worth noting as well, actually, interestingly in this position, the computer, at least chess.com's computer analysis, gives white at about plus 1.5, but after this capture, it gives white at plus 3.5. So in this position, white was just over a pawn ahead. Now they're essentially a piece ahead, just with this one incorrect recapture. Now the game saw queen takes f3, as Reti said, recapturing with a developing move. D takes e5, bishop b5 check. Now obviously the pawn defends this square, so unless you're going to just move the king, knight d7 is practically forced. We have knight c3, knight f6, and now bishop g5, pinning this knight to the queen. So we've got both knights pinned. So Meek replies with bishop e7, unpinning the knight. Quite a natural move, but it loses on the spot. Morphy plays d6. He's just sacrificing this pawn, similar to how we saw in the game, but it enables him to castle with a tempo and really dominate the position. Because after bishop takes d6, long castles, black is lost here. And in this position, on move 12, black resigns. So let's have a quick look at why black resigned. Well, first of all, the bishop's hanging. So that's the most obvious threat that needs to be addressed. So if black plays a natural move such as bishop e7, this still loses by force. Bishop takes f6, bishop takes f6, and now this knight is essentially hanging. Rook takes d7 is the best move, and now you can't take back unless you should just lose your queen. Although, interestingly, the computer's best move is taking back with the queen and just sacrificing the exchange. And this is clearly just lost for white. Lost for black, sorry. Morphy would have no problem converting this, and most players would have no problem converting this. So instead of bishop e7, what if we tried queen e7, defending the bishop? Well, here there's a few potential options. You've got knight d5 is one option, which attacks the queen, and then after queen e6, you have something like knight takes e6 check. This knight's pinned, and if the queen takes back, the queen can take, pawn takes, and then you lose the bishop. So g takes f6, then we have queen takes f6, attacking here. Note that this knight still can't take because it's pinned. So after queen takes f6, we have bishop takes f6, and now we have this bishop under attack and this rook under attack. So black is guaranteed to lose a piece. The other option for white after queen e7 is potentially bishop takes f6. And the reason is after g takes f6, again, if the queen takes, pawn takes, we have rook takes on d6. So we have g takes f6. We then again have this knight d5 idea. After queen e6, knight takes f6 check, and we'll have the same sort of issues as last time, except here the best move is queen e7, king e7. But then after this still loses a piece because of knight takes d7. and this is just a lost position for white. And this is a lost position for black. Black's down a piece. The king's in the centre of the board with very little defence. They can't castle. White's fully developed apart from this one rook. It's fairly clear why this is now lost for white. For black. Can't seem to get my colours right today. Now in this position, that's what happens if black plays bishop b7 or queen e7. Now the other move, which is what the computer recommends, is a counter-attack with a6. And this is actually really quite interesting. So I'm going to go through the computer's recommendation here, which is rook takes d6. After a takes b5, with still equal material, black's actually up a pawn in this position. Then you have bishop takes f6. So this knight is pinned to the queen. So g takes f6 is practically forced. Obviously queen takes, rook takes. And then you have rook h to d1, creating this battery along here. So if black was to castle, then you would lose this knight. Now here there's a few different computer moves. The one which I saw was b4. Then we have rook takes d7. And here the computer's recommended choice is queen takes d7. Then after rook takes d7, king takes d7, the knight can then move, and actually the computer gives queen f5 check first. King c7, and now knight d5 check. But yeah, we can see if these two rooks are equal to this queen, white's still ahead a piece. The king's not very safe. And here, if you go somewhere like king c6 or king d6, it's going to be mate. King b8 is going to be a fairly quick end to the game as well. This is just lost for black. And all of this came after move 12. And it sort of shows why this position is just impossible for black. Black made a few errors in the opening. They pushed e6. Let's go back to the game. They pushed e6, and then they pushed e5. So they wasted two moves here. And then they exchanged here, except they waste. At the end of it, black has no pieces developed, whereas white has one piece developed. And it's white's turn, and they can develop again. With the tempo as well, with the bishop check forcing a knight into an unfavourable position. And so it's quite clear, therefore, how important time is in the opening. You can't just mess around with these constant little pawn moves and things, and you have to be very cautious about helping your opponent keep a development lead, or even having your opponent get a development lead. And losing a game in 12 moves is just so indicative of that. And that's the game, really. Shortest game in the book, I think, 12 move loss. And Meek was a strong player, there's no doubting that. He's certainly a better player than I am. But he lost in 12 moves against the great Paul Morphy. So I hope you enjoyed that game. I think the next couple of games are a little bit longer, and I think some of them have quite a lot of analysis in the book as well. So they should be some good games to look at. So if you enjoyed this one, I hope you come back to watch the others. So thank you for watching, and if you've liked the video, please like, comment and subscribe, and I will hopefully see you next time.